From the halls of Peach's castle to empty, quiet landscapes, there's nothing quite like the worlds created in early 3D games. Sparse, yet full of character. Places we used to pass through without a second thought time and time again, but when fixated on, they feel as though they exist outside of reality. For me personally, Luigi's Mansion is a game that really nails this feeling of liminality, and because of that, it's stuck with me all these years later as one of my favorite games. Luigi's Mansion is basically a kid-friendly take on the survival horror genre. Taking some inspiration from the early Resident Evil games, you'll find yourself searching for keys and other items to help you puzzle solve your way to the end. Just replace weapons and zombies with a vacuum and cartoony ghosts, and you've got Luigi's Mansion. After clearing the ghosts out of a room in Luigi's Mansion, the warm lights turn on and everything just goes quiet. No music, just ambience. The sound of a crackling fire or running water with the occasional thunder in the background. It creates an oddly cozy atmosphere that envelops you before having to go back out into the mansion's dark, ghost-ridden corridors. It makes each room you enter go through a complete tonal shift by the time you are ready to move on, from a room in a haunted mansion to a safe yet strangely lonely, empty-feeling space. The first place the game drops you into is the gallery, a dusty hall of empty picture frames with no real objective other than to simply have a look around. As a kid, I didn't really understand why I was here. I'd never played a game like this with no clear objective, so I just wandered around examining everything, wondering what these picture frames were for and why is this room all gold and sparkly? And why do these statues move when I touch them? Also, why are they realistic angels and not cartoony Mario enemies with wings or something like that? It all just left me full of questions. It's worth mentioning that I first played this game back when I was 6, so I couldn't really read yet, which only added to the confusion. As it turns out, the professor just wanted us to see where he used to keep the ghosts before they all escaped, as he originally had them all stored in these portraits. But what makes this part of the game so memorable to me is the way it's executed. There's no cutscene or anything, you're just down here in some dusty old basement surrounded by empty picture frames, and if you're like me and couldn't read yet, you didn't know why. But little did I know, these picture frames actually represented all of the trials I would soon be facing once I entered the mansion. Once setting foot in the mansion, the true feeling of liminality sets in. The mansion's layout and design sits somewhere between reality and fantasy, but the fantasy aspects are very subtle. Like, people could actually live here, but then at the same time, some details just feel a bit off. And the fact that it's a game from the early 2000s when hyperrealism wasn't really possible only amplifies that. At the beginning of the game, the first place we can go to after leaving the gallery is the parlor on the second floor. A nicely decorated hangout spot with a table, places to sit, and walls lined with portraits of random human characters that we'll never know anything about. Through the next door is the anteroom, which is just a fancy word for a waiting room, but it's completely empty. When I think of a waiting room, the first thing I picture is a room full of chairs, but here we have just a few small, identical drawers spaced perfectly apart, and that's it. It gives off the vibe that this place wasn't designed by humans, but something trying to imitate humans and not quite understanding the nuances of what makes a room like this functional. So what could people be standing around waiting in this room for anyway? Some kind of clinic? Or, I don't know, maybe a cafe? Oh, so the next room over is the wardrobe room. Wait, what? What is the logic behind having people walk through a parlor and a waiting room to get to something that's normally connected to a bedroom? It feels like these 3 room ideas were just randomly stuck together. From there, you go back to the foyer where you started and go down this hallway which has doors leading to a study, and a few bedrooms, which, yeah, that feels pretty believable actually. And that's the beauty of this game. It walks the line between realism and uncanniness in a way that makes some environments feel like they could actually exist, but there's always just one or two details holding them back from true realism, like questionable layout or a lack of furniture. Just look at the theater. It's a mostly empty room with nothing but a film cabinet, projector, and a set of speakers. There's once again nowhere to sit. Who would want to watch a movie here? Then there's the mirror room, which is literally just a room containing one very big mirror and not much else. The entrance to Area 2 features these grand double doors. What could be on the other side? Maybe a big ballroom that serves as a hub for a few branching paths for us to explore? Or maybe some kind of central dining hall full of tables? Those would make sense, right? But no, we end up in the middle of a hallway. Go right a bit, and now we're looking down a corridor revealing a few different ways we can go. I always found it so strange that they didn't put the doors here so that you can enter this area and just be looking straight down this hallway from the moment you open the doors. Instead, they deliberately made things just a little bit awkward and asymmetrical, directly contrasting with the oddly perfect symmetry found in some rooms. Outside of a few areas, most of the mansion is connected by these narrow halls illuminated by dim lights and candles, leading to a bizarre, dreamlike backrooms vibe, left deserted with the ghosts that once populated them now gone, but still feeling haunted as you lose count of the amount of times you've passed by these doors throughout the years. One of my favorite parts of the game is this sequence in Area 3. The astral room is just bizarre, with black and white tile covering the floors, walls, and ceiling. The room itself doesn't seem to serve any purpose, but aesthetically it's completely unique. It kind of reminds me of Peach's Castle in Mario 64 with its black and white tiles and prominent star motif. This room then leads into the observatory, a room where after solving a puzzle you walk out into some sort of illusion of outer space to collect an item, and then you're just back to exploring the mansion like nothing even happened. And I've always loved this part of the game. It just feels so weird and out of place, and there's nothing else like it. While some rooms feel random and abstract, others do have a clear purpose. There's the music room where you can interact with instruments, the cold storage room in the basement that's completely frozen, the artist's room that's full of all kinds of projects and art supplies, and plenty of other rooms that thematically make sense, like they could exist in a real mansion. Then there's others that feel like they exist outside of time and space, like this really easy to miss treasure room. You get here by scanning this mouse hole in the wall, then you're just in this sparkly hidden room full of treasure that's literally between the mansion's walls. This really captured my imagination back in the day, and it always made me wish I had my own secret room that I could just hide in. There's even a few points in the game where you can go outside and get a glimpse of the surrounding area. A dense forest with no end in sight. It always made me wonder what was out there. Are there other haunted mansions in this forest? Was the forest itself haunted? Is Luigi's house walking distance, or did he have to drive here? All these little questions that we used to ask ourselves as kids, and this game really brought that out of me more than any other. I remember looking at all the portraits in the music room of ghosts playing instruments and wondering if I'd run into these characters later. If I try this fake door again, will there be something on the other side? I wonder what it looks like down there. Why is this door boarded up? There must be something really scary in there. What is he eating? What happens if I keep coming back to water this giant flower? Why do I keep coming back to this game? The attic is mostly made up of storage rooms until you reach the telephone room, an oddly spacious room with 3 telephones eerily spaced perfectly apart in the middle, just in case, 3 people all wanted to make a phone call in one room all at the same time, I guess. I can't even make a phone call if there's a fan that's too loud in the background, so I can't even imagine that anyone would want to use this room to make a phone call, but anyway. Head to the back and you'll find a door that leads to the clockwork room, a room themed around clocks that has a couple of life-size puppets hanging from the ceiling for some reason, and at the center of it all is this bizarre playhouse-looking clock tower that ends up functioning as an elevator to get to the roof. The roof then being this vast, empty space with nothing but a campfire under the dark night sky, with nothing for you to do but reflect on what has brought you to this point and ask yourself why you care so much about a GameCube game from 2001. And yeah, I know what you're thinking. The answer to that is probably nostalgia, right? I mean, yeah, I'm extremely nostalgic for this game, and that totally adds to the weird feeling of familiarity and liminality in games in general, for me at least. But it's become a very weird, quick response these days for people to discredit a person's view of a piece of media just because they are, quote, just nostalgic for it. Being nostalgic about things from our past isn't a bad thing. In fact, it just means that the thing in question left such a positive impact on us that we can't help but continue looking back on it fondly decades later. Because this game was such a huge part of my childhood, I have such a stronger connection to it than I would otherwise. The uncanny familiarity, liminality, or nostalgia, or whatever you want to call it, that I feel each time I revisit these halls, or this bedroom, or this kitchen, or this billiards room, is what keeps me coming back time and time again. And I guess that's why this game is so special to me.